Director McGorty.
Present.
Director Crane. I believe he's absent at the moment. Director White.
Here.
Director LaRue.
Here.
Director Navarez. I believe he's absent at the moment. And Director Robinson.
I'm here.
Thank you.
All right. Well, next on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everybody would like to join me in pledging. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so next we have the consent items. I would entertain a motion to pass the consent items.
Move to pass the consent item. Zal.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to pass the consent items. Is there any discussion at this point? Is there any public comment at this point?
Public comment?
Elizabeth.
Thank you. Elizabeth Salamone, General Manager of the Russian River Flood Control District. I just want to thank you all for passing this, and I want to thank the GSA staff for getting this on the agenda. I think this is going to be a really beneficial process for all those involved. So thank you.
Welcome. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'll call the question for a roll call vote, please.
Director McGorty.
Yes.
Director Crane is absent. Director White.
Aye.
Director LaRue.
Aye.
Director Navarez is absent. Director Robinson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so the measure passes. So next we'll go on to action items. A is to authorize staff to prepare and issue a request for proposals for a consultant to perform administrative duties for the Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainable Agency. Okay, Amber, who you going to?
I'll take this one. Hi, Amber Fassett, Department of Transportation Water Agency. So since the beginning of the formation of the GSA, the county has served in an administrative capacity for the GSA. And it was recently brought up by county council that they have a concern about this because there is no real legal arrangement for it. So I did some research, also spoke with Sarah Duquette, who previously served as in an administrative capacity. And what I found out is that this was in the beginning of the GSA, it was only intended to be a short-term option for the county to serve as the administrator. And that the long-term intent, once the GSA got up and running and the GSP was developed, is that there would be some sort of a more formal long-term solution for GSA administration. So there are a lot of GSAs that contract out to an administrator. We have built into the sort of 5-year budget outlook $50,000 a year for administrative services. And so we are requesting at this point that the board authorize us to develop and issue an RFP for administrative services and to bring back probably we would bring back the proposals. We may want to develop an ad hoc to review the proposals or something along those lines, and then eventually develop a contract for administrative services.
Okay, well, thank you for that analysis. So there are questions from board members.
I have a question. That would be, how soon does the administrative service person need to be on board?
I think ideally it would be around the time that we submit the GSP, because then they could just begin basically from the implementation phase as opposed to taking over during when we're still trying to develop the GSP, which with that being about 3 months away is a pretty good timeline to be able to develop an RFP and review them and develop a contract. So my suggestion, my recommendation is that we try to have it in place by sometime around January.
Thank you.
So Amber, remind me again, are we technically legally structured as a joint powers authority?
We're a joint powers authority. There's actually nothing in the JPA that says the county is the administrator. The only thing in there is about the county auditor controller and treasurer serving, as the GSA auditor controller and treasurer because of legal purposes. But it's my understanding is that we've been operating as the administrator under this sort of collaborative management method model that's in the JPA, whereas all member agencies can contribute services, because there's nothing in there, and county council has a lot of qualms about sort of the legalities and liability around us serving in the capacity that we're serving in long term, because there's no legal means for it at this point, the way that it's set up.
So this has a lot of interesting implications. So we're planning on applying for grant funding for a variety of uses, and the grants so far have been administered by the County of Mendocino. The County of Mendocino has been an applicant. So what's going to happen as we seek additional funds, and in terms of who's going to provide the services for dispersing funds and accounting for them and doing the reporting? Is that going to be completely up to us?
That would be the administrator that's contracted. I wouldn't recommend. I do think that running the grants through the county has been very messy. I think that the county ends up covering things that aren't covered by the grant, and then the cost isn't shared among all the members. So I would, regardless of who the administrator is, I would recommend going forward that the GSA applies directly for grants and is the grantee as opposed to the county being the grantee.
That sounds like a pretty good idea to me.
I think the reason that we applied, I wasn't part of it, so I don't know completely, but my feeling after doing as much research as I could is that the reason the county may have applied is because the JPA either wasn't in place or was newly in place, and maybe the bylaws weren't completed, and so there just wasn't really enough structure in place to apply for the grant, and so the county may have done that just to sort of get it going, but it hasn't been without problems.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of funding this and finding someone to work, do we have any sense of the workload in terms of how many hours would be necessary to complete most of the tasks, and what's a reasonable rate of compensation?
So that was part of when I put together the 5-year budget projection, and Beth also helped a lot with that. Thank you, Beth. We really did try to look at the number of hours that are going to be needed, and sort of an average rate of pay when we developed the budget. It would take me a few minutes to find that, but we did look at the number of hours weekly, monthly, annually, and what we thought a consultant might charge for this type of service when developing the budget.
Well, what's the pleasure of our board? What do we want to do?
So are we thinking that we were going to allocate 50,000 for the for this project? Is this a good viable number? Do we think we can do it with the hours that are gonna be required?
Yeah, that was the amount that we planned for when we looked at the duties that would be required by this person or company, whoever it is.
And right now, we would pay for it with the assessment that we have for individual members in the JPA, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And this actually isn't, this would need to come back to the board. I think I would recommend that the board develop an ad hoc unless they wanted maybe the TAC to review them or something. But somebody, if we receive proposals, we'll have to have a review panel to review the proposals, and then ultimately the contract would come back to the board. So this isn't necessarily giving final approval on this. It's just giving us permission to move forward with the process.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion to approve the action as presented?
Yeah, I'll
I
make
think
a
there's
motion.
one other implication before we jump forward with action here.
Okay.
Amber, tell us how this would impact, if the county didn't continue in this role, our current banking arrangements, and what alternatives we would have to sort out for that.
And it wouldn't, I think from my read of the JPA, that's totally separate. That the JPA provides to be able to hire or contract with somebody for services. And the section of the JPA that talks about the auditor and the treasurer and that sort of thing is a totally different section. And so I don't think the two are not reliant on each other, because the county is still a member. And so that is something that as a member, the county is doing for the JPA.
So the county can still provide financial services for the organization without
Yes. They'll
jeopardizing
still
any.
serve as the auditor, controller, and treasurer.
Mhm. So what is our legal counsel's biggest concern with the present arrangement?
Some of it was around liability, whether, when county staff are working on things, whether or not they're serving, because the JPA is actually a separate legal entity. So, I don't want to speak for legal counsel, but the concerns that were raised to me had to do with whether when we're working on GSA projects, whether we're serving as a representative of the GSA or whether we're actually working as a county employee at that time. There also, just from my experience, I do feel like there's somewhat of a conflict of interest being an administrator and a member. It's, there's a very blurred line between the two roles. And I would really look forward to and be excited about being able to sort of just serve as a member as opposed to administering it too. I think that it's really challenging to separate out those two roles and to have an unbiased opinion on things when you're also serving as the administrator.
Beth, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Glenn. So I worked with Amber about, with this a little bit in developing the ideas. And just to give you a bit of an overview from my perspective, a GSA administrator would provide a cohesive effort towards the implementation of the groundwater sustainability plan once it's submitted, managing subcontractors, including billing, conducting a fee study, conducting the meeting administration going forward, any grant applications that, assessing grant opportunities and any applications or support letters that would be developed for other people's grants, and would be able to obtain independent legal counsel as has been recommended by county council. This is a nice overview. This is the administrative guide for this agency instead of relying on the membership administrators like Amber and some of the other efforts. So I support this. I think it's a great idea.
Okay, so any other discussion? I'm having a little trouble seeing everybody, so if someone has their hand up and I don't notice you, make sure you speak out. Okay. All right, so we have a motion on the floor to approve the action as presented, but we don't have a second. Do we?
Who made the motion?
I did.
Okay,
I second. This is Zach.
okay.
Thank you.
Is there any public discussion before we move on to a vote? All right, seeing none, let's call for the question.
Ready for roll call?
Yes, please.
Director McGorty.
Yes.
Crane is absent. Director White.
Yes.
Director LaRue.
Yes.
Director Navarez is absent. Director Robinson.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. So next on the agenda is receive reports from directors and have further discussion on member agency contribution commitments and funding mechanisms. Okay, so Amber, do you want to lead the conversation on this?
Amber, you're muted. Sorry.
Sorry about that. I can report that the county has approved the county's annual portion of $68,750. That's about all I have to report back. So I think we'd like to hear from the other member agencies if they've had a chance to take it to their boards and what the outcome of that has been.
Can report for flood control that our board is supportive of providing the funding.
Anyone else who can report?
The IRWA didn't have a meeting last month, and the month prior to that, I was in San Diego, so I didn't attend. So I don't know what their thoughts are.
I did see Jared on here. Jared, do you know if this has been discussed at all?
This has not been discussed at the IRWA level, no.
And we don't have Director Crane here. So we will probably need to have this discussion again at our next meeting.
Okay, so we should probably continue this item, be my recommendation. All right. And any public comment before we leave this? All right, seeing none, then we'll go on to.
Sorry, Glenn, I'm Beth here.
Sure. Go ahead, Beth.
Question to Amber. What is the sort of deadline for this? When would the billing go out on these contributions?
We didn't set a deadline. This does go to fund a lot of the activities this fiscal year, and the request was to start this fiscal year. But a lot of the expenses probably won't need to be made until we get closer to implementation. So I would say, we have another, although Laura or Amir might have some input, because I think it would be really helpful to be able to include these commitments in our GSP when we submit it. So although we don't necessarily need to spend a lot of the funds at this point, it would be nice to have the commitments so that we can build it into our plan before it's submitted.
Okay, well, it would be helpful to have as an administrator, have an estimate of when the funding would need to be provided to the GSA. And maybe that would also help the others be encouraged to get confirmation from their boards.
Yeah, I mean, we can send out invoices at any time. I was kind of waiting to see if we had commitment from everybody in case we needed to come back and have further discussions.
Let me put it this way. How much money have you got left? Have you got enough money to keep going?
For a little bit longer.
Okay.
I see Sean has his hand up. Sean?
I just wanted to let you guys know that we voted to authorize our contribution, I think 2 city council meetings ago, and it's been submitted for remittal. I don't know if you've received it or not yet, but we are going to contribute.
Great.
All right. Wonderful. Well, we'll continue this.
All right, I
Go
do
ahead.
believe we need a vote in order to continue this item.
Okay, well, I would entertain a motion to continue this item to the next meeting so that we can gather more information.
Would it be inappropriate to skip that step and just to send out invoices?
You know, I think that's also another way to go, is just to send out invoices and then report, make an agenda item for the next meeting to see how we're doing.
We can definitely do that.
We can do that by general consensus of the board. We don't need a vote.
Okay, I think that's a good way to go.
Okay.
Anybody disagree?
Nope, thanks, Zach.
Thank you, Zach. Good parliamentary procedure. So let's go on to item C. Direct staff to request a proposal from Larry Walker and Associates for preparation of the first annual report and return to the board at a future meeting for the board to consider recommending to the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors an amendment to the existing agreement with Larry Walker and Associates to prepare the report.
Sorry, that's a long title.
Yes, it is.
So our first annual report will be due in April 2022. And in one of our previous either TAC or staff discussions, we realized that we don't have a plan in place to be able to prepare that at this time. So our recommendation is to amend the current contract with Larry Walker and Associates for preparation of the first annual report. What we would need to do in order to do that is to get a proposal from them so we know the scope and the amount. And because it's actually a county contract, once we got a recommendation from this board, we would need to take it to the Board of Supervisors to actually amend that contract. Another reason why it's better for the GSA to contract directly. So that I understand that process is a little convoluted, but does anybody have any questions about that process that I can clarify?
I do have a,
Go ahead.
it's just on what was written in the background. I'm hoping I'm looking at a typo where it says increasing the amount of the agreement from 736,000 to 1,773,000.
That was the original contract was for 736,000. We got an amendment to the grant at one point to increase that amount to 1.7 million. So that was done previously. So the current contract amount is the 1.7 million, and the amount that would need to be added is just the cost of preparation of the report, which we don't know yet. We would need to get a proposal from LWA.
And that's to be added to what we have to pay for, or what was in that grant?
No, it's the grant will not cover the first annual report. So it would need to be reimbursed out of the GSA fund.
And do we know what that amount is?
No, that's what we need to get. So the process would be, we would request LWA to give us a proposal for that. And then we would come back at the next meeting and the board would get to see that. And then this board would recommend approval of an amendment to the Board of Supervisors. And we would process an amendment through the county system to cover that. But then it would need to be reimbursed from the GSA.
So that could be an additional beyond that 68,000.
No, it should fit within that. We accounted for those things.
Okay, thank you.
Amber, there must have been some reason we're going to amend the existing contract instead of just doing a new, smaller contract.
That's another option. We could, I guess we saw it as as the easiest option because we already have a contract. But there's no reason why we couldn't just, so we do the JPA also specifies that the GSA follows county purchasing procedures. So up to 25,000, well, I guess the board could approve any amount. But up to 25,000 you can do without a competitive bidding process. So anything over 25,000, you should do an RFP. So the board could either, which I don't know. I don't think it will be over 25,000, although I don't know. We would need to get a proposal for that to know the exact amount of this. So the board could contract directly with LWA or issue a request for proposals for the development of the first annual report, and just contract directly.
It seems like it'd be easy to amend the contract. The process probably would just go on the consent agenda for the Board of Supervisors. So I think that would be a better way, as opposed to if you have to create a request for proposals and an ad hoc committee to review them. That just takes more time. So any other board discussion?
Does anyone remember what the number was that we had on the table? This is part of our draft budget right now, the annual report. And given the timeline that it's due so aggressively, it totally makes sense to have Larry Walker do it. Does anyone remember what that first number was? I'm not proposing that we hold them to it, but it should be similar.
I see Laura's on the line. Laura, do you want to weigh in?
I think, Zach, we are looking into something in the order of 20, maximum 25,000, and for the first year. And I guess the second year might be a little less because then you have the process in place, and so that's kind of the order of magnitude in the order of 20,000, which is also what went into the financial assessments, and so like an average over. You have to do it every April, so every year. But I really see that I went and double checked what others have done. So I did my homework. I think once we set it up, then the next ones will be kind of following automatically.
Okay, so we'll have a template in place that will be pretty easy to fill it in. It's just
that's
creating
the
that
idea.
first one. Yeah, got it.
And it is looking like implementation funds are going to be available.
Yeah.
And the applications will be able to be submitted in, I think, fall, winter 2022. So it's possible that going forward, they would be grant funded.
And actually, I checked the latest version of the implementation package, and all the cost of DWR changed quite significantly the original version of the package, and it's not anymore just for construction projects, but the implementation can cover feasibility study, data collection, administration, and so pretty much all the cost of the GSA. So that's a good news, actually. The only problem is that they've been delayed till fall 2022. They were supposed to happen sooner.
Amber, did you say that in this budget range, it's something that this board can approve on its own without having to push it back to the Board of Supervisors for the county?
No, so the reason that it needs to go to the Board of Supervisors for the county is because it's a Board of Supervisors agreement. So
if we had a separate standalone contract.
If it was a separate standalone contract, no. What I was saying about that is that we follow the county purchasing procedures, so that it would need to, anything over 25,000 would need to go to a competitive process. This board can approve contracts up to any amount if it's its own contract.
And Laura, do you guys have a strong preference one direction or another?
No, I don't, but I really don't think it's gonna be more than 25. So that just to give you an idea, I think we were looking into examples that are available now online, and I think Also, it has to be done between February and March, so it's only 2 months of work. It's not so many hours.
So in the future, Laura, would this be something that the agency itself could file, would you say?
It really depends. So I checked, and so the annual report requires contour lines of groundwater levels, all the hydrographs, all the data that have been collected. So it really depends if you have a staff person. Sure, if you have a staff person that it's kind of partially dedicated to that, to the GSA, yes, that can be done. I'm just saying that you need some kind of background. It's not just data entering. So you need some kind of plotting and exercise. But I hope we can set it up as much as possible as a template that you can reuse.
Okay, any other questions or issues from board members? Is there anyone from the general public who has a comment or would like to ask a question? Okay, would anybody like to make a motion for the action?
Which action are we talking about? The amendment or?
Yes, the amendment of the contract to include $25,000 to Larry Walker and Associates for preparation of the first annual report.
Yeah, I will make that motion. I don't know about the amount, whatever the amount is that is appropriate.
Yes, okay, we'll leave it at
I
that.
think the original agenda item was to solicit a proposal
Right,
for a modified contract.
I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. You're correct. Okay, so
Yeah, so I will move to direct staff to request a proposal from Larry Walker Associates for preparation of the first annual report and return to the board at a future meeting for the board to consider recommending to Board of Supervisors an amendment to the existing agreement with LWA to prepare the report.
okay, is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any additional comment? Right, then we'll call for the question.
Roll call vote. Director McGorty? Director McGorty? Can you guys hear me?
I hear
Yeah,
you.
I can hear you.
Glenn was frozen for a second there.
Okay, let's try this again. Glenn, are you with us again?
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay, now I can hear you. Director McGorty, your vote, please.
Yes. Yes, please.
Thank you. Director Crane is absent. Director White?
Yes.
Director LaRue?
Yes.
Director Navarez is absent. Director Robinson?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
All right. Our next agenda item is the authorization of budget adjustment in the amount of $13,000 to reimburse Mendocino County for spring 2022 groundwater monitoring and discussion and possible direction regarding contracting an entity to conduct groundwater monitoring beginning July 2022. Amber?
Yes, so we will need to begin groundwater monitoring immediately after submittal of the GSP. So when the county did this year's contract with RCD, we did build in the spring groundwater monitoring to not have any lapse in monitoring. And it also includes setting up the wells in the Sigma portal in order to be able to enter the data. There's a process to enter each well into the portal. So there's $13,000 in the contract for setting up the monitoring wells and conducting the spring groundwater monitoring. So the request is for the GSA to reimburse the county in the amount of $13,000 for that after it's done, and to authorize a budget adjustment for that. And then for the board to have a discussion today about how to conduct monitoring going forward, because that contract will end in June. It will only include the spring monitoring, and so we will need to contract with an entity, whether it be RCD or another one, to continue the monitoring going forward.
All right. Well, I see Deborah Edelman is on the call. So Deborah, do you want to weigh in and kind of tell us how things are going and what your thoughts are in terms of the likelihood that you'd want to continue providing this service?
Yes, RCD would be interested in continuing the service. And, you know, the one thing I would say in favor of our continuing would be that we already have the relationships established with the various landowners. There is a subset that's going to be, currently the CASGEM network includes 42 wells. It's getting narrowed down to 16 starting in the spring to try to be efficient with costs. But if that were to ever expand again, again, we already have the relationships with all of the 42 well owners. So that would, and have established a system to protect privacy as well. When we first started the CASGEM monitoring, we created a system so that names and addresses were only appear, they're not in the records. They've been removed from anything related to reporting to the state, or in this case, it would be the GSA, to protect privacy. So we have those systems established. If you were to go with another entity, you know, which you certainly could, I would encourage that same kind of privacy protection, and you know, for whoever is going to be doing the monitoring to protect the well owners. And as far as how it's going, it's been great. This is a slightly off topic, but Russian River Flood Control, on behalf of the GSA, did hire RCD to do monthly monitoring, and that has yielded some really interesting results. I did it in August and September. It's the first time we've gotten data in those months, and it's been interesting. And Laura could probably speak more to that. They've been doing some analysis, but anyway, that's all I have to say.
Okay, Beth.
Thank you. To Deborah's point about the monthly monitoring, reporting out from our TAC meeting yesterday, we had general consensus from those who participated in the meeting yesterday to suggest to the board continuing the monthly monitoring rather than going to once in the spring and once in the autumn, as has been done in the past, or even transitioning to quarterly. The data that Deborah has already obtained, and considering we are in very interesting times when it comes to water, I think that and talking to the consultants and some of the other TAC members, I think this is worth the board's consideration. With that in mind, there's 4 options that we've quickly developed that I would suggest need to be assessed a little bit more, but continue conducting the monthly monitoring moving right into January, because this expires in December this year. 1, the contract with the flood control district to RCD could be amended as long as the GSA was approved the reimbursement for that. The second one is that the GSA board recommends the Board of Supervisors an amendment of the county agreement to include the monthly monitoring. This would push it over the 50,000 that Amber was talking about earlier. So this is a longer process, a little more bureaucratic tape. Third is to implement the monthly or quarterly monitoring in July, just not worry about it the first half of the year, and enter into a new agreement between the GSA and the RCD. And the fourth option, which I prefer, would be to have the GSA contract directly with the RCD to conduct the monthly monitoring from January to June 22, with the exception of April 22, which is already currently covered by the County of Mendocino contract. And then the GSA could continue that rather than start the contract in July is what is suggested to be discussed today. The contract could start in January. This isn't an item to, there's no action today. I think it was a suggested direction to staff. So that's the input from the TAC. Like I said, general consensus of those who were in attendance. Thank you.
All right, well, we can't make that decision today, but that's interesting input. And I think it should be something that we bring up at a future board meeting. Are there any other comments from our directors at this time?
I need a little more clarity on what we've committed to spend and what we've spent, if anything, for our year one monitoring. Are we officially in year one? Or are we talking about year zero monitoring here? And so this would all be beyond what we currently have represented in our draft budget.
So the board authorized at a previous meeting that $16,000, I want to say it was in August, that was $4,000 from each member agency to do the fall drought monitoring, because we felt it was really important to assess the effects of the drought on the groundwater in the basin. Right. So that's the monitoring that's currently happening. And then the monitoring that RCD is doing besides that is CASGIM, because CASGIM is still in place. Once we submit our GSP, CASGIM goes away and the Sigma monitoring begins immediately. And so the spring monitoring which is just one time in the spring in April, is currently the county included in that contract so that we didn't have any sort of lapse in monitoring. So this is asking for reimbursement of $13,000, which covers that spring monitoring plus the setting up of the wells in the Sigma portal so that we can enter the information. So we have not spent anything out of our year one monitoring budget, because that was a separate authorization and contribution from member agencies for the monitoring we're doing now. Does that help?
Yeah, so if I can just recap here. So basically all this stuff that could be theoretically considered year zero. None of this is represented in our year one budget.
The 13,000 is. That's part of the year one budget, because that is actually year one, which is only really a half a year. But we included that as year one in that budget. It's really only 5 months. It's not even a half a year. It's like February through June.
So the 13,000 on our agenda item here is conceptually part of this draft budget that we have floating out there.
Yes.
Great.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Are there any comments from the general public? Okay, well, if that's the case, I wonder if somebody would like to make a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to authorize the budget adjustment.
I'll second that. This is Zach.
Any further discussion? For the question.
Director McGorty.
Yes.
Director Crane is absent. Director White.
Yes.
Director LaRue.
Aye.
Director Navarez is absent. Director Robinson.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries.
I do think it would be helpful on that item to have some direction to staff for future meetings on which way the board would would like to go, whether they would support the recommendation of the TAC, whether we want to put that on a future meeting to discuss, or whether there's some sort of information we could bring back to the board that would help in that decision. Because we do need to be ready. This budget adjustment that was just authorized will allow us to do the required monitoring in the spring, but we do need to plan for July forward. And if the board wishes to do either quarterly or monthly monitoring, we would need to sort of figure out a means for that.
Well, I support the monthly monitoring and the RCD.
So,
I think it would be prudent to get a budget update on what it will cost us to move from a biannual to a monthly monitoring. I know some of our wells are fully automated, so it's no big deal, but I know other ones require visits by people, and that sounds expensive to me.
So we could, at the next meeting, or between now and the next meeting, we could ask RCD to provide us a proposal for that the board could consider, if that would be helpful.
Glenn, I have some preliminary information on that if you'd like it now.
okay.
So currently, the monitoring has gone on monthly for 2 months, as Deborah noted. It is the implementation phase. There were some startup costs for the change to monthly monitoring, etc. Once we complete probably another month or so, we'll have a better idea of what the monthly regular cost will be, but it could be around $3,000 to $3,500 a month. That's for manual, for staff to go out and read the elevation. The long-term proposal that I would support would be for implementing equipment such as a data logger that would collect the information in real time, and then could be downloaded once a quarter by personnel. And I propose that the GSA administrator could assess this possibility, come up with costs, possibly do a phased effort where there might be some wells that it would be more beneficial to have that data more quickly than others. So it could be a phased approach, which would also phase the costing, or it might be less expensive to purchase all the equipment at once. We might get a grant for it. So there's lots of options there. But the monthly manual monthly monitoring by personnel is sort of a stopgap, so that we're not missing the opportunity to gather this data even just once a month. But to boil it down, we're thinking it's going to be around $3,000 a month.
So it sounds like we should, maybe next meeting, revisit this and with some proposals and costs, so that we can make a more informed decision.
And is there going to be a November meeting? There is, okay. Because if if the GSA doesn't make a decision and before the flood control's December board meeting, I'd like to take it to my board to make sure we can cover the costs temporarily, just to keep the monitoring going. I think that's really essential. So I'll work with Amber and stay in touch about that.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right,
So
with that in mind.
Just to clarify, in terms of what kind of costs you're asking the RCD to give you an estimate of, could you clarify that again? Is that strictly for monthly monitoring for the first half of 2022, or were you also looking for something past that?
I would ask that we actually see two quotes. I'd like to see one based on the current monitoring regimen that we specify in our plan, which is also draft form. I know it could be modified, but what we're talking about here is changing our plan. So, yeah, it would probably require two quotes, at least for me to understand what it is we're talking about.
Okay.
All right, well, then we'll direct staff to work with Beth to come back with a better sense of what this might cost, and if we make a change to our monitoring plan, and give us options also for instrumentation. All right, Next agenda item. Presentation from Larry Walker Associates on the initial review of the public comments on the Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency Groundwater Sustainability Plan. Laura?
Yes. Okay. So, and this is gonna be brief. Don't worry. What we want to discuss with you today is just giving you an idea of who commented on the plan. You know that the plan was out for public review starting mid-August till September 24th. So we received on top of the comments from the public and can you go up? Okay. On top of the comments from yep. Well, maybe can I share my screen? What do you think? Would that work? Thank you. It's just easier. I don't have to say up and down.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just making, I do it for you so that you don't have to go crazy. Oops. Sorry. I'll share it now. Okay. And so on top of the comments that we received from TAC members and the board members, we also received some other letters with public comments. I think all these comments have been really, really helpful. So we just want to acknowledge all the names of the people that kind of gave us different feedback throughout the process. And so now and one of the reasons, Michael, I also want to share, because we slightly changed I changed the timeline that I want to show you. And I have to say, probably now it's when the time comes for the board to really do some kind of action. And so here is do you see my big screen? No. Yeah, okay. So
you need to swap your presentation
yeah,
view. Yeah.
I that's what I thought. Sorry. This is good, right? Okay. So the public was out the plan was out for public review August 16th to September 24th. We had 2 TAC meetings on October 13 and October 20, in which we went through the key comments. I also want to acknowledge Stantec, our facilitator team, that really helped us a lot in organizing all the comments that we received. And so now we are in this moment between, we are incorporating the comment, we are providing answer to some of the comments, and that maybe will not require any modification in the GSP, but just a clear answer. What we are shooting for is to have a GSP that includes all the revisions by sometimes mid-November or November 19. And at that point is when the clock really will start ticking. And we would like to get all the final edits and comments from the board and the TAC by December 3rd. So this would give us enough time to include the final comments and have a GSP ready for your approval by December 15. This is what we're shooting for. So I really would say what you have to keep in mind is this December 3rd date. So if you have really big problems, you want us to change half of the GSP, no, I'm sorry, that's not gonna happen. But if you really want to see something different, I think December 3rd is really kind of we cannot go much farther than that. And I can tell you why, because December 15, you will approve the draft. Maybe we will still have to make some changes in a few figures, or maybe look at some formatting and whatever, and then everything will be ready for the GSA for uploading in January on the DWR website. So this is pretty much how the process will work. Anyway, what I want to point out is that if you want to start reading the GSP right now, it's already available. Might not be the final one, but you will see that the comments that we received will not require major changes. So you can even get started. And we wanted to point that out because we understand that you guys are very busy. So we wanted to tell you exactly when to expect things coming your way. That's the idea. And so in terms of the comments, just to give you more information, we received 7 formal letters. And the letters came from the city of Ukiah, from Mr. James Sullivan, from the Farm Bureau, from a consortium of NGOs, from the National Marine Fisheries Service, and from the Russian River Keepers, and from Sonoma Water. So the letters are all available on the website. So if you want to look at them, you can go and get them. Once we got the letters, as I said, Stantec, our facilitation team, helped us a lot, and they kind of extracted the comments from the letters and they created a matrix. And in this matrix, basically, the comments have been divided into different groups, and each group has a different relevance. So group A are comments that are substantial and may require TAC and board directions. And these are the comments we already discussed in the past 2 weeks with the TAC members. Group B, yeah, it may require large edits to the GSP, but it's more a technical comment. And Group C are more specific issue, editorial, and other easy to address comments. So obviously we will not bug you with the Group C comments, and also for the TAC, we mainly concentrated on Group A comments. What needs to go into the GSP is a formal response for all the comments that we received during the public review period. So this will be included in the GSP as well. So I just give you a brief overview of the comments that we received. I want to point out, with respect to comments received in other basins, we have been extremely lucky. So we didn't receive any really strong, bad, and disruption comments. It was more consistent comments that really helped us shaping better some of our language, but nobody was totally against what we were proposing. So I really think that all the outreach that has been done in the past months and years is paying off. So we probably created good working relationship with different entities, and so there were good comments, but nothing like, oh, come on, we really don't like anything of what you did. It was more like providing good ideas. There were some comments about the outreach and engagement and the impact on disadvantaged communities and tribes. And I think what we decided is that we mainly need to clarify that most of the basin is a disadvantaged community. So whatever we do, it's already taking into account disadvantaged communities. So we will be highlighting some more in the text and providing some more background. But these are comments that the NGOs consortium provided pretty much to all the GSPs. So
Laura, just for clarification, what is the DAC?
a disadvantaged community.
Okay.
Sorry.
So that's most of Mendocino County.
Exactly. That's the thing. So basically what we did is already looking at all the disadvantaged communities. We will just put it out more clearly at the very beginning. I think the NGO consortium that wrote these kind of standard letters, they didn't really check the condition of the basins. So, and really these letters were pretty much the same in many basins. So we just have to point that out, that whatever we did already included a lot of attention to DAC. And we also kept our collaboration and engagement with tribes. So we had another meeting with Javier, and we are waiting for comments from them. So, and this will be clearly explained in the GSP as well. Then probably the biggest part of the comments was on how we define our groundwater elevation and our depletion of interconnected surface water. And so basically what we did is, just to refresh your mind, we use the approach that has been used also by the plans in Sonoma County. We kind of agreed with them and move forward with a consistent view. So we are using groundwater conditions that are corresponding to drought condition to set the minimum threshold for depletion. But we are using, the idea was to use an average of the three worst dry years, so not really get the worst one. The problem is that in Ukiah, we don't have measurements for 3 dry years because a lot of our data starts in 2016. So we don't even have a dry year among the data. So what we did is we added a bound of uncertainty and just to explain, and we are telling them that everything will be a little bit revised in 5 years once we have a little bit more data, because we don't even have this dry year to start with, only for 4 points. So it's really not enough. So there was this request for a more protective minimum thresholds, but I think we have a good answer, and we are really discussing a little bit better in a consistent comments how we are seeing this adaptive management, which is basically which is going to address really the uncertainty that we have so far in the data, and will basically be refined in 5 years from now once we get 5 more years of data. And the idea is also that all this information will end up into the model. So the model will be recalibrated. And once we have a better model, we'll also be able to calculate stream flow depletion due to groundwater pumping using the model, which is something that we cannot do right now. So I think we discussed quite a bit with the TAC, and everybody agreed that we are not changing our approach. We are just clarifying a little bit the text and added this extra response to all these comments that is really kind of acknowledging the comment, but explaining what's our reasoning behind the way we are moving forward. And it looks like we didn't get any red flag from the TAC, so we will be, everybody was in agreement yesterday. There were quite a few comments about monitoring network and data gaps. And one of the comments was that we didn't have a clear plan for obtaining funds for management action, project and management action for addressing data gaps and implementing the monitoring network as described in the GSP. So I think what you guys are already doing now with this discussion about future funding, at least for the first year or first few years of the agencies, will be helpful. So if we can add something like that in the GSP, will provide a little bit more clarity on what's going to happen next year. I also think we agreed yesterday that we will provide a better implementation summary in what is in Chapter 5 right now, with a clear commitment, at least for next year, in terms of the data that will be gathered. So once the board decides on, for example, let's go for monthly measurements on these many wells, yeah, we can really have a summary table that explains clearly there will be 16 wells throughout the basins where monthly measure will be taken, and then we can move from there. And that's so that's, I think that will be enough to provide a little bit more concrete plan into these GSP from the perspective of implementation. And these comments on implementation and how the GSA will get funding for a project is coming pretty much everywhere. And we may also want to be a little bit more consistent in explaining which are the fundings coming down the road for which the GSA will apply. So for example, next fall there will be the implementation funding, and the GSA should really kind of think about applying for those fundings so that then for the next few years, everything will be covered. And I think these were probably the three main categories of comments that we received, really like the disadvantaged communities, the interconnected surface water impact, and the data gap and implementation. And if you want to have more details, the presentation that we gave at the TAC had a little bit more details, but it's I really think, as I said, we didn't really get many bad comments. So it's I think this is a good summary. And this is, again, just to make it even easier for you, main concerns regarding interconnected surface water threshold, concern about how data gap will be covered, and request for additional project management actions, but mostly from the perspective of a clear implementation plan. So this is I think a good quick summary. Thanks, Amir, for bringing everything into 3 slides. But I think we just want to pass on to you the concepts, and then for more discussion, you can really refer to the tax slides. And I don't know if you have any curiosity, comments about questions about comments that we received.
Any questions from board members?
I have an observation. Both Laura and Amir took their skills as large data set analysts and organizers, and were able to apply that to a bajillion comments and sort through them. You guys did a pretty good job. It was amazing.
That's good, right? So it's just, oh, okay, done. No, but this plan was better. You know, up in Scott Valley, we received 32 letters and 1,000 comments. Wow, that was really something. Here, I have to say, it was pretty easy. It was very consistent. All the comments were going in a similar direction. So, and I think it was really good, the discussion we had at the 2 TAC meetings, both this week and last week, and we really could nail down how to answer in a way that seems strong enough.
So my own personal observation on the concerns regarding groundwater surface water interface is that it's not really well understood as a science. So, and particularly you get into our unusual geological situation, it's all the more complex because of that. So, you know, that's something that we have a lot to learn about still, just in terms of how do you monitor something like that.
Yeah. And I think one of the good things that now we can say about that component, Glenn, is that so DWR is installing or already installed some of the wells that they promised that we start working for a couple of years ago. So we will have those transects of well measured continuously across the river, and hopefully that will be very, very useful to better understand what's happening.
Are there any? Go ahead.
So on the proposed response, where it says firmer and more detailed commitment to implementation and data collection, is that a commitment to do more and spend more?
No, it's just explain better what will be done. So
Okay.
like saying, if you guys already were discussing today about these 16 groundwater monitoring wells, and maybe hopefully you will decide that really these 2 times per year, honestly, from my perspective, it's useful, but it's not telling us much. So at least we need to go quarterly. But just say, okay, starting February 2022, the GSA will be monitoring 16 wells quarterly, for example. And then this number of wells are already monitored continuously because, as I mentioned, the DWR wells will be continuously monitored, and some of your wells are already with continuous transducer. So just have a clear description of what's already happening, so that which is not, it is not fully there, because you know in July and beginning of August, when we were wrapping up the plan, you guys were also in the middle of the discussion, also thinking about financing and everything. So now we can kind of have a better commitment. We can say, okay, the GSA will go after implementation fund next fall, for example, and so on.
Any other questions? How about from members of the public? Does anyone care to weigh in?
Hey, Glenn, I just wanted to add to first comment that Laura explained about the disadvantaged communities. So one thing that we're going to do in response is upgrading or updating our communication and engagement plan. And we already talked to Stantec to do that, but based on our understanding, that probably would go into the implementation. So it's not going to be revised in this current plan. And the update is basically to have a plan going forward during implementation for outreach and holding meetings and all of that. So our response would be that that section would be updated. And then during the first year of the implementation, Police Stantec would enhance that section.
Sounds good. Other questions?
What's our timeline look like, Laura, Amir, on incorporating whatever appropriate edits to our plan? And will there be additional release of drafts for at least this board to look at?
Yeah, we are looking at the week of mid-November. So you will have another month. Actually, December 3rd is what we want to have as your final say. But yeah, middle of November, we will have pretty much a final draft of the entire GSP. Honestly, Zach, beside, we agreed with the TAC on adding a new PMA that will look into understanding impact of water emergency, let's call it like that. And it's not a big it's just looking at a possible mitigation plan and trying to understand use sometimes next year to try to understand how the system can be managed, considering eventually more drought, eventually different releases from Potter Valley and whatever, all these kind of things. And then we will add this new table with a bit more detail on the implementation plan. And then there will be a little bit of change language in the interconnected surface water. Other than that, there were not really many comments that require the actual changes in the GSP. But what we will do is we will develop written responses to the comments that we received. Anyway, December 3rd is your homework. The last day.
I have a question for Laura and Amira, and this has to do with some of the smaller wells that are found kind of not in the main aquifer, but adjacent to it, that people are concerned about going dry because of extra pumping for cannabis, or just because it's a drought year. Do you address that?
So what we were suggesting and discussed a lot, this is really an important component, Glenn. So we did a sort of preliminary well outage analysis that basically looked at, it's not yet, it's not fully fleshed out because we don't have all the information that we need, but at least there is a procedure. So we were looking at all the wells for which we have information, and we were thinking, okay, what happens if groundwater level declines by this much? How many wells are going dry? So we did all that analysis. It's in the appendix 3, I don't remember what, 3 something. And that really addresses what you are talking about. What we discussed a lot in the TAC is also the need for a better management action that will do a more complete well inventory, so that we have a better understanding of where the shallow wells are and which of these shallow wells are eventually in danger. Because I understand that, people that are living on a shallow domestic wells, they might be worried about future changes in water availability, because if their well go dry, they are without water, right? So, and that's something that needs to be prevented as much as possible.
Yeah, so
So-
in the coastal plan, when you're applying for a permit, you have to do a hydrological study of your immediate area, and there's also a minimum threshold of water that has to be proven in order to get that. And I don't recall that that's really specifically addressed in our plan, and maybe we don't need to, but it's something that the cannabis program is being pressured to include hydrological studies for any new wells to supply cannabis in some of our more borderline aquifer areas. So I just kind of bring
Yeah.
that up as something that I get, people have concerns about, and when they discuss groundwater, particularly in Redwood Valley.
No, it has to be in the plan, so it's there, Glenn, and it should be expanded. In fact, it is one of the action that we suggested in the framework of this idea of drought relief, because really having a better understanding of which wells are at risk would be very important. And right now, unfortunately, there are so many wells that we don't even have in our database, or for which we don't have information on how deep they are, so we cannot really put them in the right place, right? So now it has to be there. It's and it's really something that DWR requires, and it's under this framework of human rights to water, and so that's why we added this appendix with the outage evaluation and possible how well eventually would go dry, which well eventually would go dry. Okay.
All right. Any further questions from either members or the general public?
Glenn, I just wanted to add to Laura's that right, like she said, the well inventory PMA that we have, that would help with understanding the wells, and then we can redo the study on the impacts. For now, what we have is basically, if we go back to our minimum thresholds that we set, less than 10% of the wells as we know them would be impacted, would go dry. But whatever causes that minimum threshold can be cannabis or can be overuse or any other reason. The other thing is what you said can be actually put in place for well permitting procedures. And what other basins have done is added to their well permitting that they need to consult the GSA to issue well permits. Like GSA can be involved. So that's something that the board can request to be done. It's not something that we need to put in the GSP right now, but that probably helps in streamlining the well permitting process.
Okay, thank you for that. That maybe actually we want to consider in the future. All right. Well, with that, I can accept your report, Laura, and we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the discussion and appointment secretary of the Ukiah Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Amber?
Back. Okay, yeah, so in February, Director Green was appointed as secretary of the GSA. And when he resigned earlier this year, I think in June, we did not appoint another secretary to replace him, and we were supposed to do so within 90 days. So the recommended action is to have a discussion and hopefully appoint a secretary to replace Director Green. The JPA does state that the secretary takes minutes, although that's not the way that we've had it set up. I know the last time when we were appointing officers, there was a question about what the secretary actually does, and there's not a lot, but we're supposed to have one.
This position is largely ceremonial.
Yes.
Does anyone on the board want to volunteer to have secretary as part of their creds? So we appoint a volunteer. We have people who aren't here. They usually are the prime candidates.
If I may just jump in, Director Crane is the vice chair, so he would not be a suitable person to appoint in his absence.
Well, you know, if Ross replaced James, he
Don't go there. Don't
he
go
also
there.
replaced his
No,
titular head.
no. I've got so much on my plate right now. I can't even read my own emails, and I'm just going in too many directions. Even if it is in title only.
Yeah.
Glenn, if I may,
Yes.
I would just offer Al a little bit of feedback. If you were so inclined as to volunteer, and at any such time you were required to take minutes, I would volunteer to take those minutes for you. But I think mostly what it would be is finding a piece of paper now and again. But I have your back, Al, if you want to do it. I'll,
Well, I don't want this meeting to go any longer than it has to, so I'll do
there
it.
you go.
Okay.
I make a motion to nominate Al White as secretary.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I'm not even going to wait for comments. It's been moved and seconded that Al White serve as our secretary. Are there any other nominations? All right, in that case, I'll call for a vote.
Director McGroarty,
Yes.
Director Crane is absent. Director White,
Yes,
Director LaRue,
Yes.
Director Navarez is absent. Director Robinson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
All right.
Al,
Well,
we owe you a large bottle of some delicious alcohol of some sort.
or a bag of walnuts, your choice.
I think
Okay.
both sound to me.
All right. So director reports. I just a shout out to Beth for helping us with the Hopkins fire, with getting the Russian river keepers to come up and bring with them some of their silt screen erosion control devices. And I was out there this morning, and we had very active participation from the California Conservation Corps and LACO Engineering and Mendocino County, and we were moving at really record speed for the county. So basically we were authorized to spend the money on Tuesday, and I think we'll have most of the preliminary erosion control devices in place today. So thank you, Beth. That was really a great find and much appreciated.
My pleasure. I also contacted McGuire's and Woods offices to try to get more support with moving Cal OES to a decision. So I'm glad something worked out.
Thank you. They're dragging their feet, and it's got to be heartbreaking for everybody who drives by every day or whenever they drive by and see their place is still, burned out wreck. And we're kind of telling everyone, sort of take your time, because we're hoping that we can get some relief funding for this to pay for the cleanup. And if you start before we do that, then you're not going to be eligible. So it's been a little slower than usual, and boy, we all want to make that go away, that scar go away as quickly as possible. So thank you, Beth. Anyone else, any other director have anything to report?
Glenn, I had a question. I'm curious if you're still aware of any possible synergies between our tax or fee that we'll ultimately be levying and the direction of the Potter Valley project folks.
Well, funny you should ask, because that's what I was having a discussion with Janet and the consultants just before I got on this meeting. And we have the need to fund a whole bunch of issues on water. So besides us, there's also the Mendocino County Water Agency, which we're not exactly sure how that's going to get funded. And there's multiple options that range from, as it goes to the IWPC, they can levy not a tax, but they can start charging basically for water as one way of paying their share. So there's also the possibility of a sales tax. There's also parcel taxes. We're investigating all that, and I'm as I see Mendocino County as a whole, there's so much need for water infrastructure, not only in the interior but on the coast. And then there's a request for water monitoring in our other major aquifers in the interior. So it's really something that should be considered about consolidating it and doing much as Measure B did with mental health, where they created a countywide sales tax to pay for mental health. And finally, some good things are starting to happen because they're raising significant funding that can make things happen. So, you know, these are conversations we're going to have, and because there's a lot of synergies. And I think the drought really drove home to all of us how unprepared we really are in terms of not only physically having the ability to provide water, but just organizationally, how Mendocino County has kind of kicked the can down the road on this. And maybe it's time that we did something, because it seems like with climate change, we're really going to have to find some resiliencies and plan for those dry years that are more likely to occur. That's a long-winded answer, but the answer is yeah, we're thinking about this.
These fee studies that are necessary for taxes or any regulatory fees don't come cheap. And if we were able to work with other entities, not only would we save money, but we'd save a lot of time and valuable resources, because it's always the same people involved.
Yeah, they're already underway. So the IWPC is doing a pretty good job of looking at the number of parcels inside of their jurisdiction as well as countywide. So, and then they're projecting what parcel fees could look like. No one's really looking at sales tax right now. We're also discussing a referendum on the ballot to you know, to get people to vote for it. So and that's going to have to happen pretty quick, because you know we've got an election coming up in November of next year. So yeah, it's going on, and we probably need to reach out a little bit more with the IWPC. We're kind of somewhat integrated with them, and talk about this.
Any ideas what we could do so we could move forward with agendaizing some of these thoughts and formalizing or abandoning them?
Yeah, well, it might be good to invite the consultant that we're working with IWPC to actually address our group as well, to share what they've discovered so far in terms of number of parcels and you know we're pretty solidly inside of IWPC's footprint. So I think we should probably have a discussion soon, one of our meetings on this. Either November or December meeting.
I'll work with you offline, Glenn, to put together the appropriate agenda item.
Okay, sounds good. Other director reports?
At this point, I would think November seems like it's already going to be pretty packed, and maybe December won't be so packed because that'll be past the point of a lot of decision making. So December might be a good time to do it.
Okay, happy to do that, Amber, and we'll work together with SAC and come up with something.
Sounds good.
Any other director comments or reports? Any thoughts from the general public?
Glenn, I'll just let everybody know that reservoir releases from Lake Mendocino are being dialed back about 5 CFS per day, except for yesterday they actually dialed back 10 CFS. So we're getting up there, and got notice yesterday from the State Water Board to keep an eye out. They may be suspending curtailments in the lower and upper Russian River based on conditions. So if you have a water right, keep an eye out on your email. Make sure you're enrolled in the email notification system, and check out the state's drought website for more information.
And thank you for that, Beth. Let's hope that curtailments can end soon. All right. Well, if there's no further business or comments, I would entertain a motion to end the meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Okay,
Can I
I think,
ask, can I ask about the next meeting?
yes,
We have two, for some people, the 11th won't work, which would be our normal meeting date. So we're proposing either the afternoon of the 10th or the 12th of November. Does anybody have a preferred date, or do one of those dates not work for any of our directors?
We have a TAC meeting on the 10th.
We do. We discussed having a TAC in the morning and then a board in the afternoon. Like it, apparently it was that way a long time ago.
Yes, it used to be a very long day.
Yeah. Honestly, because I think we will have to be there. It will be the last discussion on GSP. If we could do the 10, that would be easier, but both of them on the 10, and we try to be efficient.
10th
So there-
works for me. The 12th's not very good.
looks like any of those days would work for me.
Okay, we will do the 10th at 1:30 then. We'll plan for that.
What time would you propose the TAC be then?
I was thinking 10.
I will hold it. Thank you.
All right, well then, thank you very much, everybody, for attending the meeting, and we'll see you next month.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for leading, Glenn.